Australia once rejected the Owen gun. Officials dismissed it as crude, unreliable, and unworthy of frontline service. Yet in the Pacific jungles, where mud swallowed rifles and humidity crippled foreign weapons, this discarded design became the only gun soldiers could trust. In New Guinea's thick rainforest, patrols learned that survival depended on a weapon that refused to jam. The Owen did exactly that. It kept firing after rainstorms, after falls into mud, after days of sweat and grime. While admired foreign guns failed, the rejected Australian one became the most dependable tool in the entire theater. This is the story of how a weapon nearly scrapped by its own army rose to dominate the deadliest terrain of the war and became a true jungle legend. The Owen submachine gun began its life in a small workshop far from any battlefield. It was not born in a large factory with experienced engineers. Instead, it came from a young inventor who worked quietly with basic tools and limited resources. The early design looked rough, with edges that seemed unfinished and a shape that reminded officers of improvised weapons rather than modern military equipment. When the Australian Department of Defense first reviewed the prototype in the early years of the Pacific conflict, they saw little value in it. The weapon felt strange in the hands and looked different from anything already in service. Many believed it would never survive a real fight. The Army already relied on foreign designs considered more advanced. British Thompsons and American-made submachine guns were seen as the standard. These weapons came from well-known factories with long histories, and that reputation carried weight inside meeting rooms. The Owen prototype could not compete with such prestige. During early inspections, reviewers noticed its awkward balance and simple exterior. Inside the test range, the gun fired, but few were impressed. Its appearance created doubt long before any mud, rain, or sand truly challenged it. For the officers making decisions in those early days, the safest choice was to reject it. The rejection placed the prototype at risk. Unwanted designs usually disappeared into storage or were broken down for parts. Nothing suggested that the Owen would be different. It sat on a table among scattered tools and blueprints, waiting for disposal. The workshop carried the smell of oil and metal filings, and the only movement came from dust drifting across its unfinished frame. Yet, while officials dismissed it, a small group of testers looked a little closer. They noticed something unusual when the gun was handled roughly or shaken in the presence of dirt. The internal parts seemed less affected by debris than expected. This small detail became the first spark that kept the weapon alive. Australia needed new equipment as fighting intensified across the Pacific. Thick jungles, wet seasons, and long patrols pushed soldiers to the limit. Weapons that worked well in Europe sometimes failed under the heat, humidity, and constant mud. The Army struggled to supply enough firearms to match the demands of the growing conflict. With each report from the front, pressure increased on factories to produce more reliable tools for close combat. In these conditions, even a rejected prototype could earn a second look. The Owen was given one more testing opportunity, not out of confidence, but because the situation called for every possible option. During controlled tests, the weapon still looked crude, yet it continued to fire. Dirt was poured over it, and water splashed across the receiver. When other guns jammed after similar treatment, the Owen continued to cycle rounds. Testers noticed how the top-mounted magazine kept mud from falling directly into the chamber. The simple internal layout reduced the chances of failure. While this did not impress everyone, it prevented the weapon from being discarded. The gun slowly moved from near destruction to a new stage of evaluation, though it still faced tremendous resistance from those who believed Australia should only use established foreign models. The mood inside the testing grounds shifted during these trials. Sand stuck to boots, The air smelled of burnt powder, and the metallic notes of gunfire echoed across the open field. Soldiers handling the gun did not find it comfortable at first. Its shape created uncertainty, yet the weapon refused to fail under stress. This quality stood out in an environment where reliability meant survival. Reports formulating inside small offices noted the strange success of the prototype. These reports did not guarantee acceptance, but they gave the weapon a path forward. The rising tension came from time. Battles across New Guinea and nearby regions grew more intense. Jungle terrain demanded short-range firepower that could function even when soaked or coated in mud. Soldiers operating in these conditions needed weapons that could remain dependable after days of rain and rough movement through vines and thick undergrowth. The Owen gun seemed to offer something unusual, though many decision-makers still saw it as a questionable design. The gap widened between what worked on paper and what worked in the field. The urgency of the war created space for reconsideration even when old judgments resisted change. As weeks passed, the weapon survived each test set before it. Mud baths, sand exposure, and tilted firing positions did not stop it. Slow acceptance began to form within some parts of the testing staff. They understood that appearance meant little when the environment demanded toughness rather than elegance. The Owen did not showcase polished metal or smooth finishes. It showcased function. This was the quiet transformation at the heart of the section. A gun once marked for destruction now approached a critical turning point where real field trials might determine its future. By the end of this period, the Owen submachine gun stood at the edge of a new chapter. It had not yet proven itself in combat, but it had survived early judgment, testing protocols, and the threat of being forgotten. The next step would send it into the dense jungles of New Guinea, where every mistake had consequences and every advantage mattered. The story now shifted from controlled grounds to the unpredictable world of frontline combat. There, the weapon would face its true test, one that would either confirm the doubts of its critics or reveal a hidden strength shaped for the Pacific War. This moment of transition sets the stage for the next section, where the humid air, thick mud, and sudden ambushes of the rainforest reveal what the Owen gun can truly do. The Owen gun entered the jungles of New Guinea, not as a trusted weapon, but as a question waiting to be answered. Soldiers carried it on long patrols that pushed through layers of vines, tall grass, and heavy undergrowth. The air hung low with moisture, and every breath tasted of damp soil. Boots sank into soft ground that swallowed each step, and clouds of insects hovered over every movement. In this harsh environment, even the smallest flaw in equipment became dangerous. The humid heat worked its way into metal and wood, and mud clung to every surface. Weapons that performed well in dry test ranges changed quickly under these conditions. It was inside this challenging landscape that the Owen began its true trial. The first days of use showed how different the rainforest was from the controlled fields of Australia. Rain fell with little warning and soaked everything within minutes. Soldiers could feel water dripping from the tops of trees onto their helmets. The ground became slick and roots twisted across narrow paths. Rifles often needed careful cleaning, yet the jungle rarely gave the time or space for it. The Owen test teams followed infantry patrols through these routes, watching how the weapon responded to constant wetness and rough handling. What they saw began to change opinions. The gun continued functioning even when coated with mud and exposed to streams or rainfall that poured like sheets from above. One reason for this reliability came from the top-mounted magazine. It sat above the receiver, and gravity helped keep mud away from the feed system. While other guns collected dirt and moisture inside the chamber, the Owen resisted clogging. Soldiers dragged it through brush and occasionally dropped it in thick mud during sudden movement. When it was lifted again and fired, the gun did not hesitate. The simple internal design reduced the number of things that could fail. These small details became important as the weapon faced situations it had never been designed for, yet somehow matched. Combat in the rainforest placed heavy demands on every soldier. The terrain limited visibility to just a few meters. Shadows moved between tree trunks, and danger often appeared without sound. Patrols advanced with caution, feeling the weight of the jungle pressing in from all sides. When fighting broke out, it happened fast and at close range. Weapons had to respond instantly. In these moments of sudden force, the Owen showed the value of its slow but steady rate of fire. The gun did not rise sharply during bursts, and soldiers could control it while kneeling, crouching, or moving between trees. This stability gave them confidence to continue pushing through dense ground. Reports from the field began to show a pattern. The Owen did not jam in conditions that caused problems for other weapons. Where Thompson submachine guns suffered from wet ammunition and clogged chambers, the Owen kept firing. Its simple lines and rugged frame allowed it to endure constant contact with mud, rain, and debris. Soldiers noticed these differences during each encounter. They moved through swampy paths filled with standing water and across slopes where loose soil shifted underfoot. Every time a gun resisted failure, it became a tool they trusted more. The environment shaped the experiences of the troops. Days turned into weeks as patrols navigated steep ridges and deep gullies. Tropical storms followed them relentlessly. The edges of their uniforms stayed damp for long stretches of time, and the gear they carried often grew heavier from absorbed moisture. The Owen absorbed its share of the jungle, yet its internal parts kept cycling. Its reliability became a form of comfort in a place that offered little certainty. Test evaluators documented how the gun performed during night operations when darkness mixed with fog and made even simple tasks difficult. By this stage, a shift began inside the test groups. They understood that the weapon offered something valuable for the kind of fighting occurring in the region. The jungle did not care about polished finishes or refined appearances. It demanded toughness and function. The earlier doubts surrounding the weapon's shape and construction started to lose influence. Soldiers who carried it noticed that they spent less time clearing malfunctions and more time focusing on movement. This saved precious seconds during ambushes, when quick reaction made the difference between survival and loss. The intense terrain also forced the Owen to deal with extreme angles and unpredictable handling. Patrols climbed over fallen logs, ducked under branches, and crawled through thick brush. During these actions, the gun absorbed impacts, dirt, and vibration. It endured them without significant failure. When the time came to fire, it answered without hesitation. These moments created a growing sense of appreciation among the troops who relied on it. Their experiences formed the foundation for the next phase of debate that would soon unfold far from the jungle. What made the trials more important was the contrast between battlefield needs and the earlier resistance from high command. At home, many officials still saw the weapon as an inferior local design. They trusted more established foreign models and believed that the Owen could not represent a serious contribution to the war effort. Yet the jungle trials began to show that the environment demanded specific qualities that the Owen delivered better than its competitors. The weapon's performance forced evaluators to reconsider earlier assumptions made in comfortable offices far from the realities of New Guinea. As the trials continued, more units had opportunities to carry the gun during long patrols. Their feedback added layers of evidence. Reports described how the weapon resisted jamming even after repeated exposure to mud-filled streams. They noted how its balance allowed accurate fire during close engagements. They also highlighted how easy it was to maintain in field conditions, where cleaning tools were limited and time was scarce. These observations created pressure inside administrative circles. The decision to reject the weapon no longer seemed aligned with the information coming from the front. The reports from New Guinea returned to Australia, carrying a message that surprised many officials. The Owen gun, previously dismissed as crude and unreliable, had survived conditions where other weapons struggled. These field results created tension between the soldiers who trusted the weapon and the decision-makers who believed it had no place in the army. The headquarters in Australia received document after document describing how the weapon resisted mud, heavy rain, and close combat stress. Yet old assumptions and early impressions continued to shape opinions among officers who preferred weapons with established reputations. Inside meeting rooms, the contrast between field reality and official expectations grew sharper. Tables filled with papers, diagrams, and evaluation charts sat between groups who looked at the weapon in very different ways. Some believed that a gun created outside traditional channels represented a risk. They questioned its long-term durability and the capacity to mass-produce it. They also feared that adopting a locally designed weapon might reflect poorly on earlier decisions that favored foreign models. The Owen gun, therefore, became more than a tool for soldiers. It became a symbol of disagreement inside the military structure. To resolve these divisions, new trials were organized. These tests placed the Owen against established weapons, such as the Thompson and the Sten. Ranges filled with soldiers preparing for evaluations where mud, water, sand, and rough handling were applied to each model. Observers recorded every detail while smoke drifted across the field and metal clacked under repeated firing. The Owen continued to perform well, even when exposed to the same intense treatment that caused failures in other guns. Its simple construction no longer appeared crude. Instead, it seemed purposeful, built to survive the very conditions that dominated the Pacific theater. Despite these results, resistance lingered. Many officials were uncomfortable with adopting a gun that had once been rejected. They worried about production costs and supply chain changes. They also feared that supporting a locally developed weapon might offend suppliers who provided foreign designs. Meetings grew long and tense as opinions shifted back and forth. Some argued that the trials in New Guinea represented a unique environment and that the Army should not base its decisions on jungle conditions alone. Others pointed out that the Pacific War demanded exactly this kind of reliability, since much of the fighting occurred in terrain similar to New Guinea. At the same time, soldiers continued sending reports from the field. These reports described close combat inside vegetation so thick that vision often narrowed to only a few meters. In these settings, the Owen's steady rate of fire and dependable cycling provided crucial advantages. A gun that functioned in the middle of a surprise ambush meant survival. A gun that jammed meant danger. This simple contrast appeared again and again in accounts from patrols. The frontline reality showed how the weapon had become part of daily life in the jungle, even if high command had not officially recognized it. Pressure continued to build as the war intensified. Australia needed equipment that could be produced domestically and delivered quickly. Imports from overseas did not always arrive on schedule due to long shipping routes and threats from enemy submarines. Factories across Australia began expanding production capabilities to meet wartime demands. The possibility of manufacturing a reliable local submachine gun became more appealing as supply challenges increased. The Owen could be built without relying on complex imported parts. This feature added weight to the arguments in favor of adoption. The narrative inside the Army slowly shifted as more officers visited the test grounds to witness the weapon firsthand. They saw how mud clung to every surface during simulated jungle operations. They watched how soldiers moved through obstacles while firing. They observed how the gun handled sudden impacts and rapid movement. The more they saw, the harder it became to deny its reliability. While concerns remained about the weapon's unconventional appearance, those concerns no longer overshadowed performance. Function began to carry more influence than form. Still, the transition toward acceptance did not happen quickly. A long history of relying on foreign weapons created a sense of comfort, and abandoning that reliance required significant persuasion. Supporters of the Owen worked to demonstrate how the gun offered unique advantages that aligned with the country's strategic needs. They prepared reports, diagrams, and simplified explanations to show how the design reduced jamming in difficult terrain. Over time, the growing body of evidence began to outweigh earlier judgments. The debate reached a turning point when injuries and losses in the jungle emphasized the importance of dependable weapons. When soldiers faced sudden attacks, they needed equipment that would fire at the moment they pulled the trigger. Every failure carried lasting consequences. Decision-makers began to understand that the battlefield demanded immediate reaction, and the Owen provided that reaction more consistently than other models. This realization opened the door to reconsideration. The weapon was no longer viewed as an untested prototype. It had already demonstrated its capabilities under fire. By this stage, the conflict inside the command structure reflected a deeper issue. The war in the Pacific forced Australia to adapt. The country could no longer simply follow the equipment decisions of larger nations. It needed tools built for its own terrain and challenges. The Owen represented this shift. As more evidence arrived, doubts weakened. The concept of a local weapon designed specifically for jungle conditions became increasingly appealing. When final comparison trials concluded, the results showed a clear pattern. The Owen outperformed other guns in reliability and ease of maintenance. Soldiers who used it recommended broader adoption. Factory evaluations confirmed that the weapon could be produced on a large scale. These factors combined to create a tipping point. Officials who once resisted began to accept that the weapon had earned a place in the army through performance rather than reputation. This phase of the story ends with the Owen standing on the verge of official approval. It had survived rejection, scrutiny, and political hesitation. The next step would take it into widespread distribution, where it would face the ultimate test against Japanese forces in some of the most intense jungle battles of the Pacific War. The narrative now shifts toward frontline combat, where the weapon's reputation will be shaped not by argument, but by the harsh demands of survival. The Owen gun entered frontline service at a time when the Pacific fighting reached a new level of intensity. Australian units pushed through the jungles of New Guinea, Bougainville, and nearby islands where Japanese forces prepared strong defensive positions. The terrain formed a living wall around every patrol. Tree trunks rose like pillars, vines hung across narrow paths, and the ground shifted between deep mud and sharp roots. In these conditions, the Owen finally faced the combat challenges that would define its reputation. Soldiers carried it close to their bodies as they advanced through wet and humid air that clung to their skin and equipment. Every movement created a small sound that could alert hidden enemy positions. The battles were often sudden. One moment the jungle seemed silent except for rustling leaves and distant birds, and the next moment the air filled with gunfire. Visibility rarely extended beyond a few meters. Shadows moved quickly, and enemy soldiers used the vegetation to mask their approach. The Owen gun responded to these conditions with steady reliability. Its simple mechanism cycled even when covered in grime from long marches. Soldiers discovered that they could raise the weapon, press the trigger, and expect it to fire without delay. In close quarters, This consistency meant the difference between advancing and being pushed back. The weapon's top-mounted magazine allowed gravity to help feed rounds downward into the chamber. This feature kept debris from entering critical parts of the gun. Many rifles that came from Europe or North America struggled under the same conditions. Their bottom feeding system sometimes collected mud during movement. The Owen's design avoided this problem. As soldiers crawled through underbrush or waded through streams, they noticed that the gun needed less cleaning than expected. Even after a full day of rain, the weapon remained functional. This reliability slowly built trust within the ranks. Battles often took place during heavy storms. Rain fell in sheets that drummed on helmets and soaked uniforms within minutes. The ground turned into pools of mud that swallowed boots. Soldiers pushed forward through thick undergrowth while carrying heavy packs. The Owen cut through the sound of rainfall with its controlled bursts. Firefights blended the noise of gunfire with the steady rhythm of falling water. Soldiers valued a weapon that would not jam when the moment of action arrived. When Japanese forces launched sudden attacks, the Owen allowed troops to respond without hesitation. The weapon also handled well during night patrols. Darkness filled the jungle, and only faint shapes revealed the path ahead. Patrols moved carefully with little light to guide them. Any weapon failure during these hours posed extreme danger. The Owen became a reliable companion during these missions because its design tolerated moisture and dirt. Soldiers held it with confidence as they navigated slippery slopes, crossed shallow rivers, and climbed uneven terrain. The steady rate of fire helped maintain control during sudden encounters. Instead of spraying uncontrollable bursts, the weapon delivered stable fire that allowed soldiers to stay focused on movement and positioning. As more units received the Owen, stories of its dependability spread across the front. Soldiers who previously doubted it began recognizing its advantages. Many had seen other guns fail at critical moments. They felt the weight of responsibility during combat, and a weapon that functioned under extreme conditions gave them a sense of security. The jungle did not allow second chances. When a weapon fired, it needed to fire every time. The Owen met this demand in a way that few expected when it was first rejected back in Australia. Japanese tactics relied heavily on surprise, quick movement, and close combat ambushes. Soldiers often emerged from hidden positions or waited in silence for patrols to pass nearby. When fighting broke out, it happened within a few meters. The Owen's compact size made it easier to maneuver through branches and foliage. Soldiers could shift positions quickly and aim the gun without struggling against thick vegetation. This feature gave them an advantage during the chaotic moments of surprise attacks. The ability to fire controlled bursts without fear of jamming proved essential during these engagements. Longer operations also tested the weapon's endurance. Extended patrols kept units in the field for days at a time. Supplies grew damp, uniforms stayed wet, and equipment aged quickly under the constant strain of the jungle. Cleaning rifles required time that soldiers did not always have. The Owen's simple construction made repairs and maintenance easier. Soldiers could disassemble and clean it quickly when needed. Even with limited tools, they kept it in working condition. The weapon endured repeated exposure to the elements and continued performing as expected. With each victory and each survival story, the weapon's reputation grew stronger. Newspapers and reports slowly recognized how the locally produced gun played an important role in the Pacific campaigns. While decision-makers in distant offices once hesitated to accept it, frontline experience told a different story. The Owen had become a symbol of practicality and adaptation. It represented the idea that a weapon designed for the specific challenges of the jungle could outperform more prestigious models that were not built for such conditions. Soldiers began associating the Owen with reliability and survival. They carried it during assaults on fortified positions, during long patrols through dense forest, and during defensive preparations against night attacks. The jungle challenged every piece of equipment with constant moisture, shifting terrain, and hidden dangers. The Owen faced these conditions repeatedly and rarely failed. The sound of its bursts became familiar across the front lines as troops used it to push through enemy defenses or hold their ground during sudden assaults. Over time, the weapon grew from a simple tool to a trusted companion. Soldiers learned its weight, balance, and recoil. They understood how it behaved after long exposure to rain or mud. This familiarity increased their confidence in battle. When they advanced through thick foliage toward enemy lines, they knew they held a weapon capable of performing under extreme pressure. The weapon became part of their rhythm as they moved, fired, and repositioned through the unpredictable landscape. By the end of its early combat period, the Owen had proven itself in the harshest environments of the Pacific War. It no longer needed to rely on test results or arguments made in offices. Its reputation now came from the soldiers who carried it through real battles. The jungle had tested every part of the weapon, and it had emerged as one of the most dependable submachine guns in the theater. Its success set the stage for the next stage of the story, where its legend would continue to grow as the war expanded and demands on the weapon increased. As the Pacific conflict expanded across islands and coastlines, the Owen gun moved with Australian forces from New Guinea to Bougainville, from the Huon Peninsula to Borneo, and into many smaller operations scattered through the region. The weapon that once sat ignored on a workshop table now rode on the shoulders of patrols, appeared in landing craft, and rested beside soldiers during tense nights deep in unfamiliar territory. Its reputation grew naturally, shaped by each battle and each survival story that spread through units like quiet threads connecting every part of the campaign. Jungle fighting demanded endurance from both soldiers and weapons. Days often began with humid heat that felt heavy against the skin and ended with sudden rainstorms that covered everything in mud. The Owen gun adapted easily to these shifts. Its steel frame accepted moisture without failing. Its internal components resisted the buildup of grime that came from climbing muddy slopes or crawling through dense ground. The simple design that once seemed unsophisticated now proved its value in the harshest environments. Soldiers moving through thick vegetation appreciated how the gun fit into narrow spaces and how its weight balanced well during long patrols. The weapon also suited many tactical roles. During patrol routes, one soldier often carried the Owen at the front of the formation to respond quickly to sudden movement. During attacks on enemy bunkers, the weapon offered steady fire that allowed soldiers to close the distance. In defensive positions, the gun supported troops facing sudden charges through the jungle. In each situation, its consistent performance gave soldiers confidence to act decisively. The predictable recoil and controlled rate of fire allowed users to maintain accuracy in close quarters. The weapon became a familiar companion that responded reliably under pressure. As Australian forces advanced through contested regions, they often encountered Japanese units experienced in jungle warfare. These units used hidden approaches, tunnels, and camouflaged positions to delay or ambush advancing troops. Encounters usually happened quickly and within close range. The thick vegetation absorbed sound, making it difficult to hear movement until it was very near. The Owen played an important role in these situations. Its compact shape allowed soldiers to lift it swiftly and direct fire even when branches and vines pressed tightly around them. Its resistance to jamming allowed continuous fire in moments when each second mattered, Longer operations deep in the jungle placed heavy demands on equipment. Many patrols remained in the field for days or weeks. Clothing stayed wet, ammunition grew damp, and metal parts on many weapons rusted quickly without constant attention. The Owen required less cleaning than most other guns. Soldiers could take it apart with minimal tools and maintain it quickly before moving again. This simplified maintenance allowed the weapon to remain useful even when conditions were rough. Soldiers valued any tool that reduced the time spent on preparation, since every moment saved meant more time focused on movement and safety. The Owen also supported close cooperation between infantry sections. Troops often divided roles during attacks. Riflemen advanced in staggered positions, machine gunners provided suppressive fire, and Owen gunners filled the gap between precision and volume. The weapon delivered bursts that controlled enemy movement without producing the heavy weight or large ammunition demands of bigger machine guns. Its presence strengthened the flexibility of Australian forces in terrain where traditional tactics often required adjustment. Over time, field commanders integrated the Owen into their planning because they recognized its unique value in jungle fighting. The growing legend of the weapon spread beyond immediate combat stories. Soldiers shared experiences with new arrivals, describing times when the gun continued working after days of heavy rain or after being dropped in a muddy stream. New recruits listened carefully because they understood that their survival often depended on equipment that could endure the environment. This storytelling created a bond between users and the weapon. It was not based on appearance or prestige. It came from experience in life-threatening situations where reliability was essential. In many operations, the Owen gun became part of the rhythm of movement. Troops advanced through thick undergrowth with the weapon ready. They paused at ridges and listened to the sounds of the jungle while gripping the gun tightly. They crossed rivers with the weapon slung across their chest, knowing that it would function when lifted again on the far bank. This familiarity reinforced the connection between soldiers and their gear. The more they used the Owen, the more they trusted it. The weapon also demonstrated value during large-scale beach landings and assaults where mud and water were unavoidable. As Australian forces participated in operations across islands in 1944 and 1945, they often landed on shores where sand mixed with rainwater to create difficult footing. Soldiers carried the Owen through shallow surf and up muddy slopes toward enemy positions. Even with sand clinging to its sides, the gun worked. This reliability stood out at a time when speed determined survival during the chaotic first minutes of an assault. The transformation of the weapon's reputation marked an important chapter in the Australian war effort. At the beginning of the conflict, the Owen had struggled for acceptance against more polished foreign designs. Yet the Pacific fighting did not reward polished appearances. It rewarded toughness, durability, and adaptability. These qualities allowed the Owen to rise from a nearly discarded prototype to a frontline tool that shaped the success of many operations. The contrast between the early doubts and the later praise created a powerful narrative within the Army. The more the weapon proved itself, the more it became a symbol of Australian ingenuity. Factories refined production, delivering improved versions with minor adjustments. Yet the basic, simple design remained the heart of the system. The gun did not rely on complex machining or delicate parts. Its strength came from understanding the environment in which it would be used. That environment demanded simplicity and resilience. By the final stages of the Pacific War, the Owen had become one of the most trusted submachine guns in the theater. Soldiers recommended it to new units. Commanders listed it among the essential tools for jungle warfare. Its growing presence marked the shift toward weapons designed specifically for the conditions of the Pacific rather than adapted from European expectations. By the final year of the Pacific conflict, the Owen gun had become far more than a simple submachine gun. It was present in patrols across New Guinea, Bougainville, Borneo, and many surrounding islands. It had moved from the hands of skeptical testers to the hands of soldiers who trusted it completely. Yet the story of this weapon remained unusual. It had begun as an idea created outside the usual military system, rejected by senior officials, nearly discarded, and saved only by the persistence of a small group of evaluators and the harsh reality of jungle warfare. Its journey reflected the broader challenges faced by Australia as it adapted to a distant and demanding conflict. The Owen's final wartime chapter unfolded as Australian forces conducted operations during 1944 and 1945. The fighting still occurred in thick vegetation, swampy ground, and rugged slopes that shaped every encounter. Troops continued to carry the Owen during long patrols, night movements, and close assaults. By this point, the weapon's reputation was firmly established, and its presence provided reassurance. Soldiers no longer questioned its reliability. They knew how it behaved after heavy rain and after days of exposure to the elements. The weapon became part of their rhythm in battle, blending naturally into the way they moved and reacted to danger. Throughout these later operations, the Owen played a key role in clearing bunkers, defending outposts, and supporting advances through narrow jungle tracks. The weapon's controlled rate of fire allowed soldiers to manage ammunition effectively while maintaining steady bursts during engagements. Its ability to fire after falling into mud or being soaked during storms meant that troops could maintain pressure on enemy positions without constant fear of jamming. These traits shaped the success of many small unit actions that formed the foundation of larger operations across the Pacific Islands. As the war drew closer to its end, the Owen continued to support Australian forces during the liberation of territories affected by Japanese occupation. Some operations required landing on beaches under difficult weather conditions. Others required pushing through marshes or climbing through tangled roots that pulled at equipment. In each of these situations, the weapon remained effective. The growing number of stories describing its performance added depth to its legacy. Soldiers remembered moments when the gun responded instantly during surprise attacks or continued firing after being dragged through water. These memories traveled with them long after the battles ended. Once major combat ended in 1945, attention slowly shifted from survival to reflection. Soldiers returning home carried with them experiences that shaped their understanding of the war. The Owen gun became part of these memories. It was discussed in barracks, in returning units, and later in historical accounts that examined the Pacific campaigns. People began to understand how close the weapon had come to being destroyed before proving itself. Its early rejection contrasted sharply with its later importance, and this contrast became a subject of interest among military historians. The post-war years brought evaluations of equipment used during the conflict. Factory reports, battlefield accounts, and testing documents were reviewed to understand what worked and why. The Owen stood out among the findings. Its simple construction, resistance to jamming, and suitability for jungle warfare were recognized as key advantages. These qualities came not from copying foreign designs, but from creating a weapon that matched the environment in which it would be used. The Australian military began to appreciate the significance of this lesson. The Owen demonstrated that innovation could come from unexpected places and that solutions tailored to specific conditions sometimes outperformed more advanced or prestigious models. As Australia transitioned into a peacetime period, the weapon continued to serve in training and in limited operations. New weapons eventually replaced it, yet the Owen's influence remained visible. Many aspects of its design informed later projects that sought similar reliability in harsh conditions. The idea that simplicity could enhance effectiveness became an important point for future designers. The Owen story also encouraged more openness toward local innovation in military planning, showing that valuable ideas could emerge outside traditional systems. The gun's legacy grew stronger as veterans shared their experiences over the following decades. Oral histories revealed how the weapon helped troops survive close combat in environments that challenged every piece of equipment they carried. Photographs taken during the war showed soldiers holding the Owen during patrols, resting with it in shelters, and using it to push through thick ground. These images captured the connection between the weapon and the people who relied on it. Over time, the Owen became known not only for its technical strengths, but also for its role in shaping the emotional memory of the conflict. In museums and historical collections, the Owen now appears as a central example of Australian wartime ingenuity. Placards describe its unlikely origin, its early rejection, and the tests that saved it from destruction. Visitors learn how the weapon faced the demands of jungle warfare and earned its place through performance rather than reputation. These exhibits help preserve the story for future generations, who may not understand how significant it was for soldiers who fought in the dense and unforgiving terrain of the Pacific. The legacy of the Owen also includes lessons about adaptability. The Pacific War revealed that equipment designed for one environment often failed in another. Many foreign weapons struggled in the mud and humidity of the jungle. The Owen succeeded because it matched the realities of that landscape. This insight influenced how Australia approached future conflicts. Military planners learned to prioritize testing in realistic conditions rather than relying solely on laboratory evaluations or assumptions based on foreign experience. The weapon's story became a reminder of the importance of understanding the environment before committing to a particular design. By the end of its service life, the Owen had become more than a wartime tool. It had become a symbol of resilience. Its journey from rejection to widespread use reflected the unpredictable nature of innovation during war. It suggested that valuable ideas can come from unexpected sources and that persistence in testing and refinement can transform overlooked designs into essential equipment. Many veterans who carried the Owen spoke of it with respect because it performed when everything else around them seemed to fail. As historians look back on the Pacific campaigns, they often highlight major battles, strategic decisions, and large-scale operations. Yet the story of the Owen reminds them that small tools can shape outcomes in ways not always visible on maps. The weapon supported countless patrols, enabled soldiers to respond quickly to sudden danger, and helped maintain momentum in difficult terrain. Its resilience contributed to the broader success of Australian forces throughout the war. The Owen gun, a weapon that almost never existed, became one of the most reliable and respected tools of the Pacific War. Its journey reflects the importance of adaptability, simplicity, and the willingness to look beyond first impressions. The rejected prototype became a jungle legend because it met the demands of the environment better than anyone expected. Its story remains a lasting part of Australia's military history, showing how an unlikely creation shaped the outcome of countless encounters in some of the harshest terrain of the conflict.